Alright guys, hopefully you can hear me alright. I'm recording this from my house. I wanted to go over something because there's two different ways to import a module. So I created two different files and I'm going to show you how to create a module and a class. For this project, you are not required to use classes or functions. But whenever you're looking online for help, they often use modules, such as you are using the Turtle module, so you don't have to create your own module, but you will be seeing online that they use different modules. So if you wanted to create a class, again, you don't have to. I highly recommend you don't for this project right now. But if you wanted to create a class, so first, the best thing to do is add in some comments, and you type in class. This is an example class. I named the file example module.py. It's going to have two default or two variables, x and y. Here on the default variables. And here is something called a class constructor. Two underscores, init for initialize, and two underscores. Every function or method or constructor in a class has to be, again, with self. Because you usually will create objects, like your painter object, and this class code needs to know which object it's referring to. So I'll show you an example here in a second. But here's an example constructor. It's called anytime a class is created, or an object is created, I should say. So when you create a new object, and again, I'll show you here in a second what it looks like. And it's usually meant for initializing variables. So I provided some default values here, and I'll show you two different ways you can either use x and y, or they'll default to 0 and 0. And it's good whenever you create functions and classes, you comment on them and comment what all the variables do. So this is an example of a constructor. It's called anytime you create an object. Let's give this code a method. So it's just print coordinates. Again, it's passed in self. This tells the program which class or object is actually calling it. So if I wanted to print the coordinates x and y, note that your object is now known as self. So whatever the current object is calling this function or method is, uses this as an example method function. It'll be part of the example class. All methods need this self variable so that the computer knows which one. So if I do an object and I call print coordinates, you can access whichever object called it by using self. So get the x value from self and the y value from self and do this. Note in print, you know that they separate everything by spaces. So if I came over here and did print hello, and then I did comma world, it would print both these strings and put a space between them. If you look up the API, you see this separator. So sep equals, and I can put in blank, so nothing. So this would remove the spaces. I could have also put in, for example, a dash, and then everywhere I pass in, so I put a dash between, so it'd be hello dash world. I can put in a space, it'd be hello space world, or I can put in nothing and it'll run hello world together in one world. So that's an example of a method plus part of a class. You can also have standalone functions. So again, this is everything in this class. So this is an example class. And here, this is not in it because it's not indented. Everything in this class is indented by 2. This is not indented, so it's not part of the class. This is just an example function. It takes 2 plus 2, so let me document it. Computes 2 plus 2 and returns the result. So we name it result. Click result. Also very good to put in an empty blank line at the end of every file. This used to be problematic. Computer programs wouldn't work unless there was an empty line at the end, but most of them now work with it. So here's an example module, just like your turtle module. When you have functions and while loops and then you can come over here and close them and make them look all nice so you can see your code and find things. So this is an example module. If I wanted to use this module, I can do, and like we did with the turtle, import, and example module. Note you don't have to include the .py. What this import does is it looks for any file that has this name that ends in .py. And I can import this as X module. And so I can create an object. I'll call this object 1. And then what this statement does is all of this code here is going to be imported under the name X module. So it's basically saving all of this, the entire module, and saving it under this name. So if I want to access this class, I would type in X module, wherever my nickname was, and then I can get an example class. If I do, and what this does is it's going to call the constructor, and because I didn't pass in X and Y, it's going to default to 0 and 0. I can do another object, object 2. Again, it's under the X module name, and I can pass in, let's do 5.0 and 10.0. And then I can call the object function. So if we look over here, this takes no parameters except for self. So print coordinates. Again, you don't pass self or anything. What this does is it takes this first object, it calls this function, this method of this object, and it passes this in as the first argument. So this object.print, it will come find this section of code and pass object 1 into self, and so it gets object 1.x. And then I can have it print object 2, and then I can come over here and get value. And if I want to do this example function, the standalone function, again, everything from that module is saved under the name X module. So I'll get X module.example function. Again, it's just printing or returning 2 plus 2, and then I can print value like that. If I come over here and run it, you see it ran just fine. So this is how we've been doing it with Turtle. I'll show Turtle another way of doing it here in a second with Turtle. But this is how you import modules using import, and you give it a name. Now let's say that I didn't give it a custom name. I just said import example module. It's going to default to everything being example module, the full name. So I'd have to come over here and rename this as example module. So if I run it, it runs just fine. So my point is that some class, so we've been doing import turtle as TRTL, or TRTL. So we've been renaming this word turtle as this shortened version. It's not shortened by much, but it is slightly shortened. So if I wanted to come in and create a turtle object, I would do painter equals, remember we're importing the entire module as TRTL, and the name of the class is the turtle class. We've also been creating a screen at the very end of the code, and we've been calling it WN for window, in which case it gets the module, and then it calls the screen object, and it creates a screen, and we can access functions of this screen object as when, and it was main loop. So that's how we that's how it's taught in this class. This is the method it does. Now again, sometimes whenever you go online and look for ways of doing it, sometimes they won't rename it as that, and they just use import turtle. That means that you have to use the full name of the module. So you have to use the full name. You might see it like that. So again, this is one way of doing it. Another way is to do from example module import example class. If you see in some example code, it's structured like this. What this statement does is it's only going to import this one class object. So we'll only import this class and nothing else. So a lot of times whenever you're programming and you're getting needed to use a module, you don't want to import the entire module. You only need one or two functions, maybe one class, or maybe you just want one function. For example, if you're importing from math and you want the square root, you could do from math, and it's lowercase, import square root function. So instead of importing all the math tools and math code, making your file really big and slow, it only will import this one function. So what that means is if I come over here and do the same thing, again, I'm not giving it a default name. I think you can do as and name it. But if I come over here and run this, it runs just fine. If I were to try to now do the value equal example function, and then try to print that value, I'm going to get an error. Example function is not defined. The reason why it's not defined is I only imported the class in the setup. You notice also that whenever I do this, I don't have to do example module dot example class, because I'm literally how this differs from the previous where you don't use from is that it literally will import these things directly in here. So it's like coming over here, copying all this code and just pasting it in right here before your main build. So there's no reason for you to do the module. But if I wanted to do both of them, example function 2. So here I'm going to import two things. I now have both the function and the object done. Now again, I don't need the example module dot example function. So to give you a comparison, this is one way of doing it using the from statement. Or if I did import as X module, I have to put X module in front of it. And going back to how turtle is usually done, so we've been doing in this class import turtle as TRTL. Sometimes you will see, let me go back here. I forgot something. So here, if I wanted to import everything, like I don't want to list every single thing, you could also do star or asterisk. Asterisk means does everything. So looking back at turtle, occasionally what you'll see is it'll say from turtle import star. So what this says is from turtle is going to copy and paste all the code from turtle.py and put it here. And now we don't need to include these names, the name of the module. And what you see is turtle can be directly accessed. Again, you shouldn't be doing this because in this class, I want to see which code comes from what module. If I see something like this, I'm assuming that this is going to be your custom code. You either have a class named turtle, or you have a function somewhere called turtle. I prefer that you guys import turtle as this, So I can say, okay, you're importing this class from this module. I don't really care as much if you remove the as turtle and have it actually written like this. It doesn't matter to me. So I can see that this turtle comes from the module named turtle. It doesn't matter to me because, again, if I come over here and abbreviate, whenever I hover over it, it tells me the name of the module. And then if I hover over this, it tells me that's a class named turtle, and that's in the module turtle. So when you're looking online, you're going to be seeing it both ways. I think online, the preferred method everyone, or I should say the most common way everyone does it, is doing this, which means you're not going to see the correct, you're not going to see the fact that you need to call this module first. You don't have to do, whenever you see code online, you're not seeing turtle.screen, you're not seeing turtle.turtle. Whenever they use this from statement, they're able to exclude that thing. Again, you shouldn't be doing it, but if you see an example online, that's the reason why it looks different. I hope that helps some of you who are looking things up online on how to use Turtle. I will go ahead and say this since I'm making a video. I changed the comment I did in class. If you wanted to change the size of your screen, put Win Screen at the top, do Win Setup, and you see it sets the size and position of the main window. It takes the variables width and height and starting location. And it has some default variables. So if I wanted to do this 800 pixels by 600 pixels, it's going to change. Let me actually do this, run it. You see, create a screen. If I wanted to come over here and do it 200 by 100, it made it smaller. I think I mentioned originally screen size. What screen size does, I just found this out, is it does the internal size. So you get scroll bars, but it doesn't actually change the window. You should be doing setup. I hope this helps you guys.